My name is Ethan, 63 years old, living in a sleek condo in downtown Seattle. I'm telling you this story because it's been 3 years since my life imploded, and the weight of what I did still presses on me like a vice. This is about my wife, Claire, who I loved for 38 years, and how her betrayal pushed me to a place so dark I barely recognize myself. It's not just a story of cheating, it's about trust shattered, a life rebuilt, and a revenge so brutal it left scars on everyone involved. This happened in 2022, in the heart of the tech boom, and it's as raw and twisted as it gets. Grab a drink, because this is going to be a long one. Back in 1984, I was 22, a scrappy coder fresh out of MIT, working at a startup in Silicon Valley. Claire was 20, an art history major, interning at a gallery in San Francisco. We met at a dive bar in Palo Alto, bonding over cheap beer and a shared love of Bowie. She was magnetic, blonde hair, sharp wit, and a smile that could stop traffic. I proposed 6 months later, and we got married in 1985 on a cliff overlooking the Pacific, with 80 guests and a local band playing Modern Love. We were broke but unstoppable, chasing dreams in a world just starting to hum with tech. We built a life most people envied. In 1990, I co-founded a cybersecurity firm, which sold for $320 million in 2015. Claire opened a gallery in Seattle in 1995, specializing in Pacific Northwest artists. We had 2 kids, Mia, born in 1988, now a lawyer in Portland, and Noah, born in 1991, a data scientist in Austin. We bought a penthouse in Belltown in 2005 for $2.1 million, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Puget Sound. We hosted gallery openings, donated to charities, and took trips to Paris and Tokyo. By 2022, our net worth was $45 million, and I thought we were untouchable. Claire was my partner, my muse, my everything, until she wasn't. It started in March 2022. I was 60, Claire was 58, and we were both slowing down. I'd stepped back from the firm, consulting part-time. Claire was running her gallery remotely, spending more time on her phone than with me. She'd disappear for hours, saying she was meeting artists or clients. She started wearing perfume again, the kind she hadn't touched since our 30s. Her phone was glued to her hand, and she'd smile at texts she wouldn't share. I'm not proud of it, but suspicion gnawed at me. On March 12, 2022, I checked her phone while she was in the shower. Her passcode was Mia's birthday, 03-14-88. A text from Alex read, "Meet me at the loft, 8 p.m., wear the black dress." My chest tightened. I scrolled through months of messages, flirty, explicit, heartbreaking. Alex was Alexander Voss, a 42-year-old sculptor whose work Claire had showcased. They'd been sleeping together for 6 months, meeting at his loft in Capitol Hill, a space she'd rented for him using $15,000 from our joint account. I found more. Emails with photos, Claire in his arms, laughing, Alex sketching her in bed, receipts for dinners at Canlis, hotel stays at the Four Seasons, even a $4,000 watch she'd bought him. They'd planned a trip to Florence, using my money to fund it. I stood in our kitchen, the city skyline glittering outside, feeling like a fool. 38 years, 2 kids, a fortune we'd built together, and she was throwing it away for a guy who looked like he belonged in a cologne ad. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream. I went to my office, poured a whiskey, and stared at the Space Needle. Something snapped inside me. Not just pain, but a cold, surgical need to make them pay. Not with words or lawyers, but with something they'd never recover from. I spent a month planning. I wasn't going to play games with anonymous notes or petty pranks. I wanted their world to burn, and I wanted them to know I lit the match. First, I gathered evidence. I hired a private investigator, a guy named Vince, who charged $10,000 up front. He tailed Claire and Alex, delivering 200 photos and hours of video. Them kissing in his loft, holding hands at a wine bar, sneaking into a hotel. I accessed our accounts and traced every dollar she'd spent. $22,000 total, funneled through a shell account she thought I didn't know about. I had everything I needed, locked in a safe in my office. By April 2022, I knew what I'd do. Alex was the key. He was vain, obsessed with his image as a rising art star. Claire was in love, or at least infatuated, and she'd tied her gallery's reputation to his work. I'd hit them both where it hurt, their careers, their egos, their future. But I wouldn't stop there. I wanted something permanent, something that'd mark them forever. I'm not proud of how far I went, but I wasn't thinking about morality. I was thinking about justice. I started with Alex's loft. On April 20, 2022, I rented a van under a fake name, using cash and a burner ID I'd bought for $500 from a contact in my old tech days. I knew Alex was at a gallery event that night. Claire was there too, schmoozing with collectors. I broke into his loft at 11 p.m., using a lockpick set I'd practiced with for weeks. The place was a mess. Paint cans, half-finished sculptures, a bed that reeked of her perfume. I didn't touch his art. Instead, I planted something worse, a hard drive, hidden under a floorboard loaded with forged documents. They showed Alex had been forging provenances for his sculptures, passing off cheap materials as rare stone, inflating their value by millions. I'd spent $5,000 hiring a hacker to create the files, complete with fake emails and bank transfers. If anyone found it, his career would be over. I didn't stop there. I poured a gallon of black paint over his bed, the same bed where he'd been with my wife. I carved a single word into the headboard: liar. I left, knowing he'd find it the next day. He did. Claire called me the next morning upset, saying Alex's loft had been vandalized. I acted concerned, asked if she was okay, but I heard the panic in her voice. She didn't suspect me. Not yet. Next, I targeted Claire's gallery. On May 1, 2022, I posed as a delivery driver, wearing a cap and fake beard. I dropped off a package at her gallery, addressed to her assistant. Inside was a USB drive with a curated selection of the PI's photos. Claire and Alex, undeniable proof of their affair. I included a note: "Your boss isn't who you think." The assistant, a loyal kid named Sarah, showed it to the gallery's board. By May 3rd, they were asking Claire questions. She denied it, but the damage was done. Collectors started pulling out, whispering about unprofessional conduct. Her gallery's revenue dropped 30% in a week. I kept my routine normal: breakfast with Claire, Zoom calls with clients, workouts at the gym. She was unraveling, snapping at me, drinking more wine at night. I'd smile, ask about her day, and watch her squirm. On May 15, I escalated. I invited Alex to a meeting under a fake name, posing as a wealthy collector interested in his work. We met at a bar in Pioneer Square, a dark spot with sticky floors. He was cocky, sipping a $20 cocktail, talking about his vision. I recorded it all, using a hidden mic. I steered the conversation to his sculptures, asking about their materials. He bragged about cutting corners, passing off granite as marble, laughing like it was clever. I had him on tape, admitting to fraud. That night, I sent the recording to the FBI's Art Crime Division, anonymously, with a tip about the hard drive in his loft. I included photos of his sculptures, cross-referenced with the forged provenances. On May 20, 2022, agents raided his loft. They found the hard drive exactly where I'd left it. Alex was arrested for wire fraud and forgery, facing 7 years in prison. The Seattle art scene exploded. His name was toxic, his work unsellable. Claire's gallery was tied to him, and it collapsed. She had to sell it for $400,000, a fraction of its value, to cover debts. Claire was a wreck, crying every night, saying Alex was framed. I held her, played the supportive husband, but I was already planning the final blow. I wanted her to feel the betrayal I'd felt, not just emotionally, but physically, irrevocably. On June 1, 2022, I told her I was going to a conference in San Francisco. Instead, I stayed in Seattle, renting a motel room for $80 a night. I'd been researching Claire's routines, knowing she'd visit Alex's empty loft, still under lease, to clear her head. I waited there on June 3, hidden in the shadows of his studio, wearing gloves and a black hoodie. She showed up at 9 p.m., alone, carrying a bottle of wine. She sat on the paint-stained floor, sobbing, talking to herself about losing everything. I stepped out, my face covered by a ski mask I'd bought for $20. She screamed, dropping the bottle. I didn't speak. I grabbed her arm, dragged her to a chair, and zip-tied her wrists, ties I'd bought for $5 at a hardware store. I didn't hurt her, not physically. I pulled out a syringe, filled with a sedative I'd sourced for $200 from a shady contact. I injected her arm, just enough to knock her out for an hour. She slumped, unconscious. I carried her to my van, parked out back. I drove 20 miles to a warehouse I'd rented for $1,000 a month, an empty concrete space in an industrial park. I'd set it up days earlier, a single chair, a spotlight, and a mirror. I tied her to the chair, facing the mirror, and waited. When she woke, groggy and terrified, I stood behind her, still masked. I played a video on a laptop, clips of her and Alex, their texts, their plans to run off to Florence. I didn't say a word. I let the video speak. Then I leaned in, my voice low through a distorter I'd bought for $50. You broke a man who loved you. Now you'll see what's left. I didn't kill her. I didn't need to. I shaved her head with clippers, leaving her bald, a symbol of her stripped pride. I tattooed a single word on her scalp, betrayer, using a kit I'd bought for $300 and practiced with for weeks. It was crude but permanent. I left her there, untied, with a burner phone to call for help. I drove away, ditching the van in a scrapyard for $500 to a guy who didn't ask questions. Claire was found the next day, disoriented, by a warehouse worker. She told the police she'd been attacked by a stranger, but the tattoo, the video, she knew it was me. She didn't press charges. She couldn't, not without admitting the affair, the money, the lies. She moved to Spokane, living in a $900 a month apartment, working as a cashier. Her gallery was gone, her reputation destroyed. Alex pleaded guilty, serving 5 years in federal prison. His wife divorced him, taking their kid to California. On June 10, 2022, I filed for divorce. My lawyer, a woman named Rachel who charged $600 an hour, had everything ready. I got the penthouse, $30 million in assets, and no alimony. Claire's affair killed her claim. Mia and Noah know the truth. They cut her off, calling her maybe once a year. I sold the penthouse for $3.2 million in July 2023 and bought a condo in Queen Anne for $1.5 million. I live alone, consulting for tech firms, sipping bourbon, and staring at the city I helped build. I don't regret it. Claire and Alex took my life and thought they'd get away with it. I made sure they didn't. But every night I see her face in that warehouse, the terror in her eyes. I wanted justice, but I got something else, a darkness I can't shake. If you're thinking of cheating, don't, because someone like me might be waiting, and we don't forgive.